Can you hear me? No, really. Can you hear me? Are you listening? You're not listening. Hi, my name is Jack Wallen, and I'm here today to talk to you about something I believe is the single most important lesson that every young actor needs to learn. Now, before you tune out, if you're not an actor, it doesn't just apply to acting. I believe this also applies to writing, to music, to even just being a good human being, a good partner, a good spouse, a good boyfriend or girlfriend, or just friend in general, or just neighbor, human being. Yes. And what I'm going to talk to you today is called active listening. Now, you probably think that we all listen. It's inherent in being a human being. We listen. But active listening isn't just about listening with your ears. Active listening involves your ears and your eyes and your heart and your soul and your intellect, everything. And it brings not only such a new depth to your art, but also a new truth. And ultimately, especially as an actor, what we strive for is truth. If we can find truth in our acting, then we're doing something right. Now, active listening, what is it? Well, I have come up with what I call five dimensions of listening. And this is one of the things that my acting technique was based on, called the butterfly effect. Because I believe that the core of acting is listening. And the five dimensions of listening are physical, volume, pitch, timbre, and pace. I know it's a lot. It's a lot for something that we just do by design. By just naturally we listen. When someone is talking to us, we listen to them. But let's break this down. Let's break down these five dimensions of listening so we can start thinking towards active listening. First, we have the physical. That should be pretty obvious. Let's just say, for example, that you're on stage with somebody, or even in real life with somebody, and they say, "I love you." If they just look at you and they say, "I love you," pretty obvious, pretty simple. But what if they say, "I love you" through clenched teeth? "I love you." Or what if they say, "I love you," and their fists are balled up and their arms are shaking? That says something completely different. They've added a physical component to the words to turn the words into something completely different. That could be saying, "I love you," even though you're really pissing me off. Pretty obvious. Now let's talk about the second dimension, which is volume. If they say, "I love you" in a normal voice, okay, we get it, I love you. If they say, "I love you" in a whispered voice, "I love you." That says something completely different. But what if they scream, "I love you," or their voice goes just above normal indoor voice, "I love you." Maybe their "I love you" is so excited that they cannot wait to, the words are just bubbling up and they have to come out. Or maybe they scream. You get that, right? They scream, and then you can combine that scream with the clenched mouth and the clenched fists. We're getting into a whole new dimension of love, right? Okay, now let's talk about pitch, which is the third dimension of listening. Pitch is, simply put, the pitch of the voice, whether it's high, mid, low, or a combination. Pitch could be, "I love you." You go down, I don't have a very deep voice, but you get down there like a Barry White level of voice. "I love you." That's something very different than "I love you," right? And what happens if you combine all of those? "I love you." Ah, You see where I'm getting at? Listening is not, or listening, just basic listening is hearing. Active listening is hearing and processing. Hearing and processing what you see and hear. And you're not actively listening unless you're processing, unless you're taking in all of the components of what you hear and processing them and then reacting. Now, of course, on stage, you don't want to process them too much. You want to be able to just respond automatically. But that's where active listening becomes very complicated, because you have to be able to see the cues, all 5 dimensions of listening, and then be able to react truthfully. Because if you were to hear somebody say, "I love you," right? But they say it through clenched teeth and fists, and your response is, "I love you too." That's not truthful. That's not truthful given the circumstances. The circumstances being that the person that said "I love you" to you obviously said it in such a way that it communicates more than the words have to say. Now, the fifth dimension of listening, active listening, is timbre. Timbre is kind of a complicated idea within the realm of listening, because timbre could be the sound of anger, which doesn't have to be a scream, or it could just be a more throaty sound, a more kind of a gravelly sound, or it could be a very lilting sound. It could be a very soft sound. It could be kind of a let's just say a bedroom sound. Timbre is, let's just think of it this way. Timbre is the difference between a trumpet and a French horn. One is bright and brassy, and the other one is kind of muted and more mellow. Or a violin versus a cello. Or a flute versus an oboe. See what I mean? Timbre is the sound that we pick up, the coloration of the sound. It's not just the sound itself, but it is how the sound is colored. So if let's just say, for example, my sound comes out, "I love you." You hear that kind of gravelly, sounds kind of angry, right? It's just another dimension to the sound, to our listening. And it's the most difficult because it's not quite as obvious. Because the human voice we have every person has their own timbre, okay? Some people have nasally voices. Some people have throaty voices. Some people have very clear and clean voices. I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't even think of his name right now. He was in Alien. He was in Pumpkinhead, which was one of my favorite horror movies. Lance. Lance. I got to have his name right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, he has this really his voice sounds like he's been through a lot. It's this gravelly, throaty kind of voice that you just you know he's experienced something, and when you hear his voice, it automatically draws your attention. And I wish I could think of other Sam Elliott. Think of Sam Elliott's voice. Think of Sam Elliott's voice versus Bobcat Goldthwait's voice. That's timbre. If you know those two, you know that they are on completely different ends of the spectrum of voices. Sam Elliott is this deep, kind of all-American cowboy voice, and Bobcat Goldthwait is this screechy. Don't get me wrong, I love Bobcat Goldthwait. His movie Shakes the Clown is absolutely wonderful. But his voice is kind of shrieky and choppy, and to some people it's very grating and annoying. So that's timbre. And finally, the fifth dimension of active listening is pace. Pace is obvious. It's the speed at which you say something. So if you say, I love you, very quickly and very choppy, it's different than I love you. There's subtle differences, but those subtle differences actually add up, especially when you start combining them with all of the other dimensions of listening, right? So you have the physical, remember, the physical, the volume, the pitch, the timbre, and the pace. And it does take a very long time to get to the point where you can take all of those dimensions in and be able to just respond naturally. And the other thing is this is kind of a warning here, is that when you start really actively listening in real life, you're going to find that that you're going to hear things that you never thought of before, that you never thought you would hear before, and you might, it could get you into trouble. Trust me. It has been on a number of occasions in my marriage where my wife has said something to me, but I hear it in such a way that because I'm actively listening, I hear it. I hear the tone, I hear the pitch, I hear the pace, I hear the timbre, I see the physicality of her voice, and then I will react honestly to what I'm taking in, and then she will be shocked at how I react because she didn't intend for those words to come out that way. Now, that's the problem, that someone might say something. This is a problem in real life with active listening. Someone might say something to you when they have something else on their mind, and it's that something else that's on their mind that's driving the physicality, the pitch, the tone, and the pace, but they are sometimes not connected to the words. Now, that's different than when you're on stage, because usually the actor that you're working with isn't thinking about well, they better not be thinking about something else other than what's happening in that moment. Because if they are, then, well, they need to get into the moment and be there, be present, so they can exchange with you something truthful. But in real life, active listening can be problematic, and there are a lot of times where I have to kind of step back away from that active listening and just listen with one dimension. I just need to hear the words. Now, I also said that this isn't just limited to acting. It does actually work with a lot of different artistic forms. As a writer, I actively listen when I write. And I know that sounds kind of strange because I'm not actually hearing things out in the real world, but I do hear things in my head. And if I'm actively listening, this is especially important for dialogue. If I'm actively listening to what my characters are saying, then I can write those words and the narration in such a way that it brings more dimension to it. So instead of just the character said this, then I can all of a sudden go, okay, let's take a look at these 5 dimensions of active listening and apply those to what the character says. So instead of the character just saying, they can say through clenched jaw, with clenched fists. They said it very choppily. You see what I mean. You can bring more dimension to not only what the characters are saying, but how the other characters are hearing what they say and how they respond to what they hear, right? And the same thing applies to music. If you're, let's say, for example, you're a musician and you're in a room with other musicians and you're writing a song, right? And you're writing a song on the fly. You're improvising, and you hear the drummer start working on a new pattern, and it's kind of intentionally out of sync, kind of in a jazzy way, and you'll want to hear that and pick up on it and evolve what you're playing. Same thing with if you have a singer and the singer's all of a sudden applying a different timbre to their voice, that might influence what you're playing and how you're playing what you're playing. Active listening applies to so much. And as I said, it is the single most important lesson that all young actors need to learn. Because if you can't actively listen on stage, what you're going to do is you're going to respond dishonestly, without truth. And art is truth. And I know maybe I didn't explain it so well. I'm used to kind of being in a educational environment to explain this and being able to physically move about and give examples with other people. So I apologize if I've confused you, but active listening is something that you, if you're an artist, look into it, research it, start to practice active listening, and it's not going to happen right away. It's because you're going to miss cues. Because sometimes, and I remember this very well, when I was early on studying acting, this was in grad school, because active listening wasn't really a thing in undergraduate school because we weren't ready for it and our teacher wasn't quite able to teach it. But those early periods of grad school, when I got so focused on going, okay, I've got to pay attention to not only what they're saying, but how they're saying it. And then I was taken out of the moment and my responses were not truthful. So it has to get to the point where it's second nature, and that takes time. So don't get frustrated if you can't do it immediately. It takes time and practice, and a lot of times it requires you to have a partner to go back and forth with, like the Meisner technique, the repetitions. Oh boy, yeah, I've mentioned those before. But hopefully this fall, when I start teaching acting classes again, I'll be focusing a lot on active listening because, well, that's what my technique was based on. And it will help you find a new way of listening with your ears and your mind and your body and your heart and your soul. And once you've done that, you can really, really find a new level of truth in your acting. I'm glad I was able to do this early, because there's a crew of roofers about 3 doors down that are about ready to just dig into a roof. And I didn't want you to have to listen to all that. Ha ha ha. Anyway, thank you so very much for being a part of my little world here. I hope that I've helped you learn something today, or maybe enlightened you, or maybe this is something that someone you know and love could use. If so, please share it with them. If not, subscribe to my channel, hit the little bell icon, so you can get alerted to when there's a new video, which usually Tuesdays and or Thursdays. This week you get a twofer, just because I love sharing, because that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. Art is not a sole venture. It is a community. It is a shared experience. And if I have something that I believe can help you become a better artist or a better human, then I'm going to share it. Thank you again, and I hope that you and everyone you love and know has a wonderful day.